Excellent. All right. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here, both here in person and online. Thrilled to have our final Power Friday for this academic year. And as we were thinking about the topics, it came to my mind that we have a lot of amazing grants from the National Science Foundation. And I thought it'd be a fantastic opportunity to really showcase those, both as, a way of us being aware of, the great work that's being done in the college, but also to help raise awareness of the types of things that the National Science Foundation funds. And we're going to hear some great examples from several, not all, but several of the grantees here in the college. I hope you'll observe and notice the wide variety of things that are possible with NSF funding. I also reached out to our grantees and said, do you have a program officer that you would recommend? And I was very fortunate that Jill Duke reached out, referred me to Mike, is a fantastic program officer, and he was very generous, willing to come out here and share with us some of the opportunities and his other experiences working with NSF. And again, just kind of help us raise awareness of what's possible with this funding. So by way of background, Dr. Steele is a mathematics education researcher focused on teacher knowledge and teacher learning in secondary mathematics. He's currently a program officer at the National Science Foundation, the past president of the Association of Mathematics Teacher Educators, and a past member of the Executive Council of the Conference of Board of Mathematical Sciences. He's also currently the editor of Mathematics Teacher Educator Journal. He has directed the secondary mathematics teacher preparation programs at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee and Michigan State University. He's a former middle school and high school mathematics and science teacher. And Dr. Steele has authored dozens of books and journal articles focused on mathematics teaching and learning, including the NCTM's Taking Action, Implementing Effective Mathematics Teaching Practices in grades 6 through 8, the 5 Practices in Practice, Successfully Orchestrating Mathematics Discussions in Your High School Classroom, and A Quiet Revolution, One District Story of Radical Curricular Changes in Mathematics. So it's my great pleasure to introduce you, Dr. Michael Steele. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Wayne. Thank you. Happy to be here today. Always lovely to come up and spend some time in West Lafayette. I'm going to kind of go through a little bit of an overview of some of the funding opportunities at NSF focused on the Directorate for STEM Education, which we call EDU. We actually rebranded the Directorate about 4 months ago. You may have been familiar with EHR, Education and Human Resources. We felt like Directorate for STEM Education is a much cleaner, better name for what we do, and we got a better acronym out of it, right? I was really tired of typing EHR in Word and having it corrected to her every time. So it's a much better situation for that. Okay. Clicker, not so much.
Not clicking, could you click?
All right, pardon me.
No problem, no problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, and here we are. Must have been just changing focus there. So there's our lovely headquarters, out of Alexandria, Virginia. That building's about just about a little bit more than 4 years old now. Yes, we moved from Arlington to Alexandria about 4 years ago. The mission of NSF, and you wouldn't ordinarily perhaps know that something called the National Science Foundation is actually a federal agency. I'm part of the executive branch, which is really interesting for people to learn sometimes. So our mission is to promote the progress of science, advocate the national health, prosperity, and welfare, and to secure the national defense. So a pretty broad mission of conducting kind of fundamental and applied science and STEM related research. Thinking across the whole agency, we've had the pleasure of, over the past close to 80 years, of really pioneering some amazing pieces of progress nationally and internationally. We have a lovely mural in the lobby of the NSF building that shows a number of the innovations and inventions that come through. So 3D printing, the recent that's about 5 years old now, gravitational waves, the HL tau discovery that actually is fairly recent. My favorite, which isn't represented on this particular graphic, is Magic School Bus on PBS. We funded that. We've got that on the mural, in the front of the building. So always nice that we've got education represented there, in a number of places. I pulled our organizational chart because I wanted to give you a sense. You're probably familiar at some level with the things that we do in the EDU directorate. But I wanted to convey kind of the scope of NSF. So you get the Office of the Director in the center there. And we have a series of offices on the left that kind of guide that work. We have an Office of Equity and Civil Rights. We have an Office of International Science and Engineering. I've been working a little bit with them on how we do international work. And I wanted to convey on the right, we're actually governed by a board. The National Science Board is the organization that sets direction. It sets our merit review criteria for NSF. So this is an independent group of scholars that guides that work. And then within NSF, we have now actually 8 directorates that have particular foci in the work that we do. Biological sciences, computer information, science engineering, a straight ahead engineering directorate. Here we are in EDU, where we've got several divisions under there that I'll unpack in a little bit. Geosciences, mathematical and physical sciences, social, behavioral, and economic sciences. That's probably our closest cousin in EDU for the sort of work that we would think about doing in colleges of education. Our newest directorate, and I think this is an important thing to watch because we've just stood this up. Congress had kind of charged us with doing this just a little under a year ago. Technology, innovation, and partnerships. And that may not sound like it has a ton to do with us in education. But the thing I wanted to share about that is it is a cross-cutting directorate. And the charge of this has really been to start to think about how we close the gap of taking innovations to scale. And we can think about that in terms of big science for sure, but we can also think about that in terms of education. Like if we, pioneer a new set of curricular materials or a new teacher professional development initiative, oftentimes we fund great work that impacts a group of teachers, a group of learners in a particular area, in a particular place. And then oftentimes it doesn't go to scale. So this is one of the things that our TIP directorate has been charged with, is thinking about how to bring those ideas to scale. And we've been pushing them to say, all right, what are the implications for something like TIP in the context of education? So that's your broad overview. Let's get into more, a little bit more of what we do in EDU and how it relates to the work that you all do. Before coming to NSF, initially as a rotating program officer, I myself was a recipient of a number of awards that lived in what we now call EDU. The mission of our directorate is to develop a diverse, well-prepared STEM workforce and STEM literate public by supporting excellent research and development in STEM education. And this really focuses on the entire cradle to grave continuum of STEM education. So we focus on strengthening STEM learning environments. We think about broadening participation, both the K-12 level and beyond that, institutional capacity. We think about STEM professional workforce development across all of the divisions within EDU. So here's a little bit about our numbers in fiscal year 22. Our budgetary request was $1,287 million. We received about 4,700 proposals. We had people write close to 22,000 proposal reviews. By the way, if you have not served on an NSF panel, let's talk, because it's a tremendous learning experience for people to engage in. We had overall in the directorate about a 28% competitive award success rate. That varies from program to program, of course. Made 1,300 awards, supported over 700 institutions. You can see the breakdown of who we supported there in orange. It's not just kind of veteran university-based investigators, but postdoctoral fellows, graduate students, undergrads. And then think about what was our impact on K-12, over 43,000 teachers, close to 100,000 K-12 students just in last year's awards alone, that were impacted. So one of the things we've been thinking about are what are the big problems, what are the big issues in STEM education? Where should we be investing? So first and foremost, you're going to hear me talk about a program that we've stood up in the past couple of years, specifically related to that top bullet. Disparities and persistent inequities. And you can think about this in so many different ways, like who has access to high quality STEM education in a K-12 setting and who doesn't. Who has access to do the work that we do in researching in STEM education, what voices, what methodologies, what approaches are privileged and which ones are not. We've been trying to think about AI, and we've been doing this before ChatGPT hit the scene. But certainly that's advanced our work significantly. So what's the role that AI and other advanced technologies has to transform the work of STEM teaching and learning? Like one of the things that I persistently wonder about is some motivated self-interest because it relates to my own research area. Like what would it look like to truly have a functional and meaningful like Siri for teachers where I could be teaching a middle school math class and say, all right, what should I do here? And it's listening to what's going on and it says, well, maybe you should ask this question. Like we're pretty much there in terms of having the infrastructure to do that. It's thinking about how do we deploy that thoughtfully, usefully, ethically. Aligning curriculum to the work of the future and studying its effects. As somebody who lives and breathes mathematics education, this is particularly relevant right now. This is kind of a discussion we're having here in Indiana in the K-12 setting, but also nationally. How do we modernize curriculum? And understand the impacts of remote instruction on all learners. I mean, we've got people on teams here that if we thought about this presentation 4 years ago, I'm not sure we have the number of people. We certainly wouldn't have this delightful owl here, right, sitting that now has become part and parcel of our work. So how are we thinking about the advances that we've made in remote instruction throughout the pandemic, and how do we institutionalize the meaningful and important parts of that work? So this is actually my home division. We have 4 divisions within EDU. The Division of Research on Learning in Formal and Informal Settings is actually where I make my home. We're focused really on K-12 and similarly banded informal education, as well as the formal K-12 setting. So investing in the improvement of STEM learning, people of all ages, by promoting innovative research, development, and evaluation of learning and teaching across all STEM disciplines in formal and informal settings. So this can mean classroom work, this can mean out-of-school tutoring, this can mean museum work and informal learning. We have significant investments in media, actually, as you see represented here. We're great partners with great partners with PBS over the years of making awards for innovative informal learning that they support. So you don't need to read every word on this particular slide because we'd be here all day. But I wanted to show kind of the 4, you've got DRL, Division of Research on Learning, I just talked about on the left. Our 3 sibling divisions within EDU. We have a division of undergraduate education that focuses, as you might imagine, on undergraduate education, a division of graduate education, and a 4th division that we recently also renamed when we rebranded the directorate, the Division of Equity for Excellence in STEM. So DRL, mostly K-12 age stuff. UE, first 4 years of college. This includes some specific attention. You see 2-year institutions mentioned here and some of their programs. The Noyce Teacher Scholarship Program, which many of you may be familiar with, lives within DUE. Graduate education, the very famous graduate research fellowship program lives there. And then we've got kind of our diversity, our outreach efforts over here. You get our tribal colleges and university programs, our HBCU undergraduate program, the Stokes Alliances for minority participation. So that's really focused on our equity components. You see those horizontal lines at the top where we've got a few of our programs that run across all 4 divisions. And I'll touch on a few of those as we go through. I'm going to focus mostly on what some of our programs that we have in the Division of Research on Learning. We'll talk a little about those on the left, DRK 12, Advancing Informal STEM Learning, Computer Science for All, iTest, and Rental, and I'll highlight a few of our cross-cutting ones as well. So let's get into that. And at any time, if you have questions, please jump in. Happy to answer those as we go. We'll have some time at the end to do that as well. If you see something that you want to know and understand more about, please hit the QR code. I created them for, this will take you to the landing page for every one of those programs as you go through. So please avail yourself of that. EHR Core Research, we'll change the name to EDU Core Research next time we refresh that solicitation to match the new director name. This I think is a really important program, and this is one of our cross-cutting programs that goes across all the directorates. Traditionally, like if you think about NSF 15, 20 years ago, particularly in mathematics education, like NSF invested heavily in very applied curriculum development, the math science partnerships, right? That did practical teacher professional development work. What was less well represented across the directorate was basic STEM education, fundamental STEM education research. So this is where EHR Core Research was stood up about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, as a program that funds basic fundamental research. We may not know exactly how to apply it yet, but really interesting, thoughtful work on basic issues of teaching and learning. We've had a lot in recent years, a lot of intersection recently with neuroscience, with cognitive science work lives in the EHR Core Research. So this is where you would go for fundamental research. We want to understand how students make sense of algebraic thinking and reasoning in the early grades. We're not sure what we're going to do with that. Are we going to write a curriculum? Are we going to do teacher professional development? What are we going to do with that? We're not sure. That's kind of the sort of project that would live in the EHR or research space. As I mentioned, this cuts across all directorates. So K through 20 essentially here. If you're doing work in any of those spaces, you might think about EHR Core Research as a possible outlet for that work. Next one is near and dear to my heart. I ran this program for 2 years. I was funded by this program. Discovery Research Pre-K-12, and this is actually our largest program in the entire directorate. This is focused on work in pre-K-12 formal classroom setting. This could be about student learning. We're interested in answering an important student learning question and seeing what can we do about that, about strengthening student learning opportunities. There is a teaching strand in DRK-12. So if we're interested in teacher learning, teacher professional development, if we're interested in pre-service teacher development too, like that, even though pre-service typically happens, you might think about it as more college level than pre-K-12, it still has a home in the DRK-12 program. There's also a third strand that deals with assessment and assessment development, because we recognize that investing in assessment development is a really important part of what we do in the teaching and learning space. DRK-12 has an annual budget of about $100 million. And usually we're making on the order of 60 to 70 awards, probably an average award of just shy of $3 million over the course of maybe about 4 years, annually in this program. So there are a lot of opportunities to explore DRK-12 for all sorts of work related to formal pre-K-12 teaching and learning. I will say also, before we leave DRK-12, and this is not exclusive to the DRK-12 program, we have this in many of our programs, NSF funds synthesis work. So that means, literature reviews, meta-analyses, things like that. Again, recognizing like assessment, that's a place where it really requires time and investment to do those sorts of things well. So that's the thing that I don't think I was fully aware of until I came on as an NSF program officer, and I think is a really important sort of thing to note and to look for. So that's our formal settings. Our companion on the informal side, strangely enough, is titled Advancing Informal STEM Learning. So the ASIL program, as we call it, anything that's not in a formal school classroom setting, but it is related to K-12 spectrum learning. So you see some examples up there: zoos, aquariums, observatories, planetariums, outreach programs, citizen science, media, museum work, out of school time, after school programs, science communication, like really, really important piece, particularly in this day and age. All of that falls under the auspices of ASIL. So that's our companion from the formal program to the informal program. And if you're curious, there's a lot of boundary crossing between those two, and sometimes it's hard to figure out, like, is this more of a formal thing? Is this more of an informal thing? Like, a great example is that I get every once in a while is if people want to study something about an after-school tutoring program. And that can kind of fall in the boundary. Like, okay, are we doing an after-school program that our K-12 classroom teachers are running? Because that might fall under formal. Is it something where it's an outside thing? That likely falls under informal. There are intentionally some overlap in the boundaries of some of these things. And if you ever have a question about, like, should I go with this program? Should I go with that program? That's where we can help as program officers, and we're always happy to see that. Another program we have, a little bit of a smaller program, and this one's an interesting history because we've actually changed what that acronym means over the past 25 years. ITEST, Innovation Technology Experiences for Students and Teachers. This one isn't grade banded, but the focus here is technological innovations and how we use them in formal or informal learning. So you can hit this anywhere across the learning spectrum. The real idea here is that part of the development in an ITEST project is the development of either a new technology or a technology that's used in a way that we haven't seen it used before in a teaching and learning context. That's the really important distinction for ITEST. This actually launched, I think, a little bit more than 25 years ago. It's a way to get more students in IT careers and communication and networking infrastructure careers. So it's changed a bit over that period of time. I want to take a minute to really talk about this one because this is a program we stood up 2 years ago that I think is critically important. And I'm so proud that we have this at NSF. Racial equity in STEM education. This is another one of those cross-cutting programs. It is focused quite broadly on projects that seek to understand the sources of inequity in our systems and address them in some sort of way. You will notice if you pull up the program description for this, there's not a lot of words there. It doesn't have a lot that specifies, well, you need this component or that component. We have this track and that track. It's written very openly, and that's by design to really encourage people to propose important work that's going on in the racial equity space and to look for opportunities to fund it. We've now gone, I think, 2 cycles of proposals and awards on this. So even though it's a relatively new program, you can see some of the types of things that we've funded under this program. I think this is going to be a really important one for years to come for NSF. Over in the Division of Undergraduate Education, I wanted to highlight this one too, given our audience here. The improving undergraduate STEM education. If you think about what I talked about with the DRK-12 program, but move it up to the 13 to 16 spectrum, that's pretty much where we are. So this is looking at improving teaching and learning in undergraduate STEM education. This is also another spot of overlap with pre-service teacher preparation, because we would consider that a part of undergraduate STEM education in some sort of way. So these can be content-based math and science and engineering courses. These can be teacher preparation. This can be looking at faculty development and how we support faculty in the stronger teaching of STEM subject areas. And then a couple of programs I wanted to highlight that cut across NSF entirely. You may have seen this one on diagrams. It's actually the third of those cross-cutting programs that were highlighted on that diagram, but a really important one. We've had the career program for quite a long time. This is an early career faculty development program. You're limited in terms of your career stage, in terms of who can apply to it and how many times you can apply for a career award, up to 3 times over the course of kind of your pre-tenure life in existence. And these are 5-year, mostly single PI projects. So the idea here is to give you an opportunity to spend 5 focused years on doing work that sets you up for a continued robust research agenda.
That's a quick question.
Yeah.
Is this mainly geared towards faculty who works directly in STEM fields? Like our math ed, science ed folks, but have you ever seen any go to some outside those fields, but are doing interdisciplinary work in that area?
Absolutely, yes. So this cuts across the entire NSF agency. So we've got people who work in the geosciences, people who work in engineering, computer science, as disciplinary early career faculty who are in this program as well. In addition to STEM education, in addition to people who work across those boundaries in interdisciplinary ways. So I appreciate you asking that question, Wayne. The other thing I want to highlight about career, up until a few years ago, it was strictly you're out there on your own, which is kind of not the way we work in STEM education most of the time. Most of the time we're partnering with other people and do that. But the recent revision to the career solicitation allows you to bring people on as not as co-PIs, but as senior personnel with doing kind of clearly defined ways. But you're allowed to have now people on to advise you and support you as you're doing that work. And that's a really important component. I think that was I understand where the motivation for that originally came from, but I think it was a little bit short-sighted, particularly for fields like ours, where collaboration is what we do. That's a really important piece. Research on emerging technologies for teaching and learning. The Division of Research on Learning is kind of the home for this, but we collaborate with Computer Information Science and Engineering Directorate on this. This is really focused. This used to be called our Cyber Learning Program. That's the next evolution of it. But this is really about thinking about how are those emerging technologies for teaching and learning being implemented in classrooms. iTest is a little bit more about the development of those technologies. If you're thinking that sounds a lot like iTest, because it does. And Redl is really about the implementation of those technologies. So I wanted to end the formal piece, and we'll have plenty of time for some questions and answers in a little bit, by talking about like what makes a good proposal. What sorts of things should you be thinking about as you're putting a proposal together? And really the first thing I'll say before I even get into this laundry list here is get in touch with a program officer early on. As you're thinking about an idea, as you're shaping it, we're happy to get online, have a half-hour conversation with you about the idea, to provide some thoughts about how to shape it, how to perhaps make it more competitive. If you're not sure about the fit, is it this program or that program? Definitely reach out to us. That's a big part of what we do, and I love every single one of those conversations. One of the things that you get to do as an NSF program officer is see all the amazing ideas that people have, even things that, we see a lot of things that aren't gonna get funded, but are amazing ideas. So that's really one of the big joys of my work, is to be able to have those conversations. Another small point I'll point out is, as you're thinking about how to do that, you might say, well, Mike, we know you now, but who, what if we're not a math education person? What if we're thinking about another area? We have gone to what might seem a little off-putting. You'll see kind of a generic email address with the solicitation. It used to be several years ago, you'd see listed program officers for a particular program. But then it was tough to know who to choose, right? If I don't know these people, I don't know what their expertise is. I don't know, I don't know who I'm gonna email. So we've gone to these general email addresses, but they go to the leads of our programs, who then will say, okay, here's an idea. I know who the right person is inside NSF to talk to. So don't be put off by those generic email addresses. Email those, they actually do go to real humans. I'm one of those real humans who they go to. And we'll put you in touch with somebody who can best address those ideas. So first and foremost, does what you're thinking about align with the program that you're submitting to? And like I said, if you have questions about that, we're happy to help with that. The solicitations, some of them are a bit on the long side, and they're a little bit, they can be a little bit ponderous to work through, but do give a read to those solicitations at the idea level. That gives you a lot of information about how things fit. Is the proposed work grounded in relevant research? Because everything we're funding has to build on an existing research base. NSF has 2 merit review criteria. Intellectual merit, like, is it good science? And broader impacts. I kind of think about that one as, is it science that's worth doing? Like, is it going to make a difference? I've seen lots of proposals over the years that have great intellectual merits, like the design of the study is brilliant. It's airtight. The methodology is great, but it's an idea that I can't figure out who the heck would care about this. And so you have to think about both that intellectual merit and the broader impacts. It's more rare, but sometimes I see something that, oh, yes, this could be an absolutely transformative experience. Like, I can see the broader impacts, but the intellectual merit, the design, like, there's a challenge here. As you think about writing a proposal, and most of them are 15 pages long, remember that this is going to be an audience of your peers, but it could be a potentially pretty broad audience of your peers. So think about the writing style, think about terminology and tone and content. Limit the jargon that you use, kind of unpack ideas, and get to the point. Like, if I'm 7 pages into a 15-page proposal and I'm still trying to figure out, if I'm still looking forward to learning about what the research design is, you've probably prattled on a bit too long about the research base and the foundation theoretical framework. So like, get to the point on that. We talk a lot about the who, the what, the when, the where, the how, the why, and then like the broader impact is really that so what. And make sure you're using as reader-friendly a format as you possibly can. As someone who wrote many of these proposals before I came to NSF, I was like, all right, 11-point font, that's a requirement. We'll shrink it down to that. All right, there are no requirements on those pictures. I make those as tiny as possible. Jam as much information as you can in there. I understand that impulse, but please make it readable and digestible for us. You've got merit reviewers who are going to get 7, 8, 9 of these in a pretty short time scale to read these, to write their reviews, to respond to them. So making it a joyful experience for them to read really is helpful, and making it a joyful experience for us to read. And a thing to remember also, and I think, again, this is not something that I knew quite as explicitly until I came, inside the garden wall, was that if something rates pretty well in the merit review process, but there's no questions we have about it, that's not an automatic, it's not going to get funded. Most of the time, when we get to that stage of having a set of proposals that we would consider likely candidates for funding, program officers like me will reach out to the submitters and say, we've got a few questions where we'd like some clarification on this, that, the other thing. So there's only so much you can put into 15 pages. Give us the really important parts. Make your case for the intellectual merit, the broader impacts of the work. And if there are places where you're like, if I had another 3 pages, I'd be able to tell you more about this. That's okay, because there is that opportunity down the road. When we submit questions out to proposals that we're likely to fund, we usually give you another 4 pages to continue to write and respond to those questions. So you have some more opportunities to add to those ideas as you go. I think that's a great place to pause and to give us some more interaction around questions, comments. That kind of gives you a really quick overview of some of the programs we have, some really brief pointers, but you probably have questions that you're thinking about. So let's talk about those.
Great. We do have one question from online, so we'll start with that one.
Sure.
B. Pearson says, I'm working with a nonprofit that's promoting STEM education for visually impaired students. Will we fit into any of these programs, or do we need to work with a research institution to qualify?
First of all, awesome. I'm so excited that that work is happening. And yes, there's a list, what we fondly call the PAPG, the Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide. If you look that up or look up NSF 23-1, that document will come up. That is the overarching guide for eligibility and how to put together budgets and all the guidance you need to put that together. When you look in who's eligible to apply, in those cases, universities, research institutions, usually first on the list, nonprofits, totally okay. For-profits, right? I don't think I would have considered it before I came to NSF. Totally okay. We don't fund individuals, so if you're individual and unaffiliated, that's really the only automatic rule out. But we see a lot of, particularly in our informal education programs, a lot of nonprofits apply for those awards. And sometimes they do it as the lead, sometimes they do it in partnership with a university or a research institution.
So, the university, like institute, work with a for-profit, I believe.
Yep.
Online tutoring program to help students improve math performance. And I think last time we said that does not belong to ESO. Is that how you pronounce that?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, and then so where is it? It kind of fits nowhere.
So the tutoring is an interesting question because it kind of sits in between the two. So and I think that's something that we have to give the very Apple-like answer, and that we don't comment on future products that may be coming down the road. So we don't comment on future solicitations that haven't been published yet. But I would say keep a close eye on the next generations of those, because I think there's some interest in clarifying where that space is. When we've had conversations about does tutoring fit within the Division of Research on Learning, the answer is unanimously yes. So it's just a matter of where it fits in which program.
So it's where individual.
Depending on the type, it would either fit in DRK-12 or ASOL. And like I said, keep an eye out for
Yeah, 'cause they
potentially
said
some additional guidance.
belongs to ASO, and so it's like, it's not even, it's not really in the formal setting, it's outside of the school, online program, so it's like it fits nowhere.
Yeah, that's certainly a thing that we'd be able to consider. That actually also brings me to another point. You can submit what we call an unsolicited proposal that doesn't go to a specific program. We don't get a lot of them in our division, but other divisions in the agency, it's much more regular. So if you have something that you can't quite figure out how it fits. You talk to program officers, they can't quite figure out how it fits. You might ask about, is this a good fit for an unsolicited proposal? The other mechanism we have that might be a good fit for things like that is called eager. I will not even try to recite what the acronym for that is supposed to be, but the idea behind eager is twofold. It's something that we talk about as high risk, high reward. And it doesn't fit well into an existing solicitation. So if you have an idea and you're like, this clearly doesn't fit and it's a little risky, it's a little cutting edge, eager's the place to go for that.
Everyone online, another online question from Caitlin. Can you talk a little about the Advanced Technological Education Program under the Division of Undergraduate Education, and how does it differ from RETL, RETTL?
Hi, Caitlin. Thanks for the question. I don't know a ton about ATE, so rather than try to make some stuff up, I'm gonna punt that question. I will say RETL, I know, is more focused on innovative development, cyber learning. My understanding of ATE is it's more about technology education in terms of learning about technology rather than deploying technology in kind of a cyber learning setting. But if they reach out to an ATE program officer, if you need a contact there, let me know, send me an email, and I'm happy to hook you up with somebody.
So with these grants, you look for publications to have existed and like some data before you apply for these grants.
So say more about that.
I know when she had just asked the question, you had mentioned something about publications from, like, I have a pilot program that I'm doing this summer. I may do some STEM activities with the students, so I know it's the first year. It would be better to wait until next year to present some of the findings, or would you recommend, like, the timeline? What would you recommend?
So you don't have to have necessarily a full-on pilot study to say, okay, now I'm ready to apply for an SF award. So for example, I'll go to DRK 12 again, because it's where I lived and breathed for a long time. There are kind of 3 levels of funding in there. Level 1 is exploratory. It's a maximum of $450,000. So, smaller than our multi-million-dollar grants, but the idea behind that is really kind of a pilot-y sort of thing. If you have pilot data, that's great. It's all about, in terms of how merit review panelists react to proposals that come in, it's really all about, is there a sound theoretical research base for this work? So sometimes a pilot study gives you that justification, but it's not always necessary. You can say, all right, we've got evidence in the field of X, Y, and Z, and that tells us that we really need to do this thing in STEM education in this particular way.
Okay,
And that's fine too.
thank you.
I would honestly say it's never too early to put an NSF proposal together. I recognize the amount of work that goes into it and the effort, but the feedback you're gonna get in going through the merit review process, like even if it's not successful, and just from a statistical standpoint, it's more likely than not that it's not gonna be. But it's a great learning experience. It's a great way to get feedback on the ideas, to see how other experts in the field are reading those ideas.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Often I've heard from people, you can't really get an NSF grant unless you've been on an NSF grant. Is that true, or what advice would you have for people that are on that grant?
So our merit review criteria are intellectual merit and broader impacts. What you don't hear in that is, did you have a grant before? Certainly, if you've done work in the space that's been funded, you've got publications out of it, like that helps, right? But it helps in building the intellectual merit case for it. We always, every year, have plenty of first-time awardees. And that's not just the career program, which is really designed for that, but it's across all of our programs. So yes, are people who you know in the field who are big names who have had NSF grants, are they probably going to get NSF grants in the future? Yes, but that's not because of the process, it's because of the ideas, right? So that's really how I think about it. And I'll make my pitch again at this point. If you'd like to be involved in a merit review panel, and we are doing most of them virtually entirely these days, whereas pre dawn of COVID, it was like you had to take a couple of days, you had to travel out to Alexandria. Like that was a big commitment for people. But less so now. If you want to see what that process is like from the inside, please volunteer to be a reviewer. We're always looking for them. We always are looking for mixes of early career and veteran people on a panel because we see this really as an important way to build capacity and scale up.
Do you have to be a former awardee to be on the review panel?
Absolutely.
Really? Okay.
Yes. In fact, many times, many times I think a panel has probably about half and half people who've been awarded before and who haven't. One of the things is if you're proposing in a program, you can't review for that program that year. So if you think about a big program like DRK 12, where we've got 400 to 500 applications a year and multiple people on those, there's this massive pool of people that I automatically can't use. Like they're ruled out that year. So yeah, you go get some people like who got award last year, find some of those people who do work in that space. But people who haven't been awarded yet, been awarded in another program, might be interested in this one. Those are the sorts of people that we look to find. So yeah, it's a great way to learn how to write an NSF.
Another question online, once a project is funded, does NSF have a process to review the progress and outcome of the project? And that's from Deep.
Yes. So you file an annual report every year that shares what you've been up to with the project. And it's an opportunity to, you can include publications, you can presentations you've done. More often than not now, I have people link me to the website for their project. I can see all the materials that they're looking. So every year, and that's an opportunity for me to give some feedback. It's not the only opportunity to give some feedback. I think some people just file their annual reports every year and are happy with the little back and forth we do over email at that point, and that's it. But particularly over the last 3 years as a program officer, I've been incredibly busy with off-cycle discussions with awardees and saying, all right, so I had this idea for a project and it's now completely shot to hell. I can't get into schools, or I'm struggling with recruitment, or I can't figure out how to solve this problem, or we have this research design issue that we didn't expect to have. Help me think about how to solve it. Those are fun conversations to have too. So there are those more informal ways of interacting as well. We want to hear from awardees. We'd love to give you the money and have you go off and do amazing work. But we love to hear about it because that also helps us promote it, and it helps us connect projects to other projects. I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody come to me either with a project or with a project idea that's working in space. I'm like, do you know about this project that's going on over here? And I get to know about it because of the work that I do. There's always great people doing things in the field that we just don't have the capacity or the awareness to know exactly who's doing what. So it's a really nice networking opportunity to be able to connect to other folks who are doing good work in the space.
We've got a couple minutes left, so last chance to get those questions out.
We had a couple of ones rejected, because they said that we didn't have the right, level of expertise in the team, and we thought we did. So do you have any suggestions about how to kind of talk about that?
So here's this would be my follow-up question. Did you get in touch with the program officer after that happened?
I didn't know.
Okay, please do that. Like I said, we get more great ideas than we have the money to fund every year. And particularly because as a program officer, I've heard that discussion on the panel, like you get the written reviews, but I've heard the discussion that they've had around that. So if something doesn't get funded and there's a comment you don't understand, please get in touch with us because we can shed a lot of light on those conversations and figure out kind of how to best represent it. And sometimes it's very field specific, this is why I don't want to give bad advice that may not be applicable. But reach out to the program officer, schedule a conversation about that. We'll get on the phone, we'll talk through it. And we'll navigate through that.
Fantastic. And I guess one last quick question. Once you get rejected,
Yep.
how much time do you have before you can resubmit?
You can't you can't have the same idea in multiple programs at the same time. So if you have a DRK 12 that doesn't get funded, you'll wait to the next year's award cycle generally. If you want to submit it back to the same program.
Okay, so you have about a year to revise.
So generally a year. There are some of ours that have multiple deadlines, and there's some of our programs now that are going to no deadline. So in general, if there isn't a specific number in there, 6 months is usually the thumbnail. Submit it again after 6 months. Please don't submit the same thing. Please revise it.
Yes. They'll notice, right? All right, I just want to give my sincere thanks to Mike. I've been swimming around this NSF stuff for the past 5 years. I feel like for the first time, I understand the big picture, all the different pieces put together. So this has been super helpful. Mike will be around afterwards, and so if you have other questions, hopefully I'm not fast you have to rush out of here at the end, but.
Yeah, I can hang around a little while. So,
Okay, fantastic. Let's give Mike a big hand.
thanks so much.
They got some pretty swag, hopefully.
Oh,
that lets you accept
This I can do.
Okay,
Yes,
good.
yes, I appreciate it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. It's been super
My
helpful.
pleasure.
And now we get a chance to, again, hear really the cool things that are being done in our college with this amazing funding that's available from the NSF. So just a caveat, the folks that are presenting are usually members of larger teams. Well, I don't think any of these are single PI teams. If I'm wrong, correct me. But we have about a dozen NSF grants and, many more faculty, both in our college and working across different colleges. And you'll hear in some cases across different universities on these projects. And so we're going to start off with Dr. Wanju Huang. And she's a co-PI on a project called Collaborative Research, Cyber Training Implementation, Medium, Cyber Training for Open Science and Climate, Water, and Environmental Sustainability.
All right, okay.
And we'll have about 8 minutes or so for each presenter, and then 2 minutes for questions in the transition, so.
All
you're-
right. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Oh.
That helped me a lot. And happy Friday, everyone. And thank you for being here. So I have 2 projects. The first one is cyber training for open science and climate. We already say it. The second one is NBSE. So the first one, as you can see, we just started. So starting this spring, 2023, we have several meetings already. I have not a lot to share because we are developing a learning management system for this project. I should start with my role for these 2 teams is more instructional design and also program assessments. As you can see, those people, I work with people who are, it's all right, in engineering. Most of them are in engineering. And the reason why I'm on those teams is because my expertise in instructional design and program assessments. That's why we collaborate. And that's why I'm on those teams. And because I bring my expertise in instructional design, and then they have those subject matter expertise. So on the left, you can see that is basically the steps usually we follow for these 2 projects. We will start with online learning module development, evaluation and implementation, and then research and assessment. As I mentioned, project 1, I really don't have a lot to share. So I'm going to share with you the project 2, model-based system engineering. And I have, another set of slides for you. So this project is, its name is Development, Deployment, and Evaluation of Instructional Modules for Current and Future NBSE people. This was funded, NSF, funded by Boeing, actually, a $2 million grant. And Adrie over there, she's also part of the team our external reviewer, assessment part. Can you go to the next slide?
I'll let you
Oh, sorry.
do it. You're right.
Okay, so these are our PIs and co-PI, Dr. Audine Fenterman, love her, love her. The best leader ever. She's great. The secret, honestly, I feel like, for a very successful NSF grant is you need to have a very strong PI who can bring everybody together. This is a big team. We have College of Engineering, Polytechnic, College of Education. The team is 20+ people. As you can imagine, coordinate so many people together and write a very good grant proposal, you need to have a strong leader. And Dr. Dr. John Solomon, he, chair for Triple E, and Jorge, and he's in Polytechnic. And Dr. Carrie Douglas, graduate from College of Education, but as a professor in E&E. And also Dr. Dan De Laurentiis, he's now the VP for Research and Assessment here at Purdue. So a very strong PI and co-PI teams, and also a lot of key personnel, and Dr. Adrie and Dr. Jennifer Richardson are also on the team. The goal of this project is we are developing, because model-based system engineering is the most sought after competency, actually, or the skills that corporate needs. And we try to do this to address a need. They need people who can do that, but higher education is a little bit behind. So we got this fund to develop those learning modules. Number one, for professionals. They are already engineers at those corporate companies. And then after that is we disseminate our learning modules to 2 years and 4 years colleges. So we started with like needs assessment. What do they need? And what are the topics? And I have to say, we start everything right before pandemic. Adrian and I, we had the first meeting right at the building, right behind, besides Walk. We were cramping in this small little room, interviewing our corporate partners. What do you need from your employees, and what do you need from us? We spent, I'm very proud of this record, 6 months for needs assessments. Try to figure out what they really need. We interview 11 companies. Those managers tell us what they really want to see in their employees, what their employees need. So that gives us a very strong foundation for us to develop those learning modules. All the topics we selected are actually based on their needs and our experts' suggestions. So our annual report, like our external reviewer, like just kudos to us, like you are doing the right thing. So we have this process from needs assessment all the way to development and implementation, and our pilot and implementation, our external reviewers, and then we revise. We also have a very specific target audience, like who we developed 7 modules. It's 6, but it's 2A and 2B. So who can take, or those modules meet someone's needs? So we have those like kind of like audience here. All right, and so last fall, we officially offer our non-credit professional development certificates through Purdue Online. And these are our dates. I think we finished our first one, and we are continuing to offer it. We actually work with corporates. Actually, a lot of people are from MenTech, but if anybody who is interested, they can sign up for these modules through Purdue Online. And another thing I mentioned is with integration of those learning modules for our undergrad courses. Oh, 2 minutes. Okay, good. So we already have 2 undergrad courses, actually 3. One is MBS capstone. I didn't put it there, but and also another graduate course. We got a lot of good feedback. Going back, we got a lot of good feedback from our learners. The students, especially here undergrad, they really find this is very worthwhile, and they want to learn more about MBSE. We also have produced a lot of scholarship products, papers and conference presentations, and most importantly, we will make all the learning modules we created free to public. not the video, the slides and everything. So we are continue, especially the research and assessment team, we are continue to evaluate learners' feedback and writing journal articles and conference presentations. That's, thank you.
While you're next, while Huang's coming up, any questions for
Questions?
Dr. Huang?
Cool.
So you started in 2020? or-
Yes,
Okay.
2020. Yeah. And after that, everything, we have like 2 in-person meeting, and after that, everything's online.
So as you mentioned, it's a big team and you have to work with a lot of different stakeholders in the role of designer. So what strategy have you used to kind of like, because there, you have different modules that are at different stages, just to keep that all straight, any advice?
So bring in chocolate, no. No, I think that is what we found out after the paper we published, right? That is really about the relationship building. And when you have PI and another co-PI, they are just, Dr. Aldin Fenterman and Carrie Douglas were very supportive of our instructional design team. And so in that way, they help other PIs and other researchers understand why we are there and why we are sharing, why we say the design should be a little bit like that. I forgot to mention our design is based on community of inquiry. So we need to bring teachers need to be present in those online courses. So it used to kind of change, we try to change the way they teach a little bit because they all have their own teaching philosophy, and most of the time, this is within this room, like to lecture, right? So we kind of bring different examples to them, like show them the example. I think that's the one way to make it successful. Like I'm showing you the example, but I'm not making decision for you. You have the final say. So at the same time, we also bring in our teaching philosophy. Like I share my teaching experiences with them. So
Great.
Yep.
One question online that Paul, why don't you go ahead and come up to your presentation setup? Ella online said, hi, Wanju, thanks for presenting. I understand that you are offering the modules through Purdue Online. Are those offered for free of charge? Or what are the requirements from NSF to offer them?
it's actually NSF, that is one of the requirements. We have to offer those learning modules for 5 years. So that's why we have that. Yep.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. All right, next up, we have Dr. Huang Chang. He's co-PI in a grant called Collaborative Research, Individualizing Instruction and Improving Research Using Adaptive Testing. And it's got the coolest acronym, it's I3RAT. So I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but I think that's really cool. So you're on.
Good morning, and today I'm very glad to share with you my research project. And I serve as OPI. And this is actually, from Purdue side, it's a very small amount. It's only $150,000, but I'm very happy because this is about the methods I advertise, I pushed for many, many years called computerized adaptive testing. Its old concept is the earliest large-scale AI application in education. And now we depend on computerized adaptive testing for many assessment, like United States military enlist, Army SBAN, and also GRE, GMAT, nursing, everything, is computerized adaptive testing. And also, we collaborate with Iowa State, and they are a group of excellent physics teachers, and they have connection with many, many young physics teachers in colleges. They established a platform. That platform, thousands people, thousands students, teachers use this platform for what? For assess students, to assess how much students know and how can we help the students. So they developed item bank. This is good news. So that's the reason they like us, like the method called CDCAT algorithm. So our responsibility is to develop the algorithm, develop the item selection, because you need to select item according to students' response. If students answer item correctly, the next item should be more difficult. If students answer item incorrectly, the next item should be easier. So students always being challenged during the test. Also, the key is to try to locate the students' ability and locate students' ability. And why? If students' score are all 0, then you receive no information. If students receive perfect score, I don't think you have any information. We try to make tests neither too difficult nor too easy to the student, so we can make our best assessment. So our best assessment is all the technology is actually, I actually served as the president of Psychometric Society, and during my year as president, I delivered, a study review about computerized depth testing. The second technology is called cognitive diagnosis. And if we know the students' true score, what's the next? The next is try to help the students. If two students, their total score are the same, but their learning profile different. So this is called the latent class model in statistics. We try to classify how many skills has the students mastered. So those two students, their total score are the same, but their learning profile different. From that part, and the computer can generate a very beautiful reports. And also we can do validation. We can take computer generated report to visit the teacher to see if the diagnosis is correct. So that's the reason we develop combine CD with CAT. That means our system not only is sequentially select item, but also eventually we generate diagnostic report. And also CD-CAT select the best item that provides the information. Teacher will be able to assign CAT quiz and use feedback from the resulting cognitive diagnostic report, which will provide remedial recommendation. So I think that this is transformative. Today we can use in physics, tomorrow we can use physics, English learning, and math, many things. And so this is based on our previous result. And when I was a professor at UC, at that time, I served as co-PI. We developed a similar project and we submitted a proposal to NSF. But what's the difference between Illinois project and current project? Illinois project, is just it's a get started. There's a lack of continuation setting. That means you develop an item, and once students know all the items, the system is useless. You should constantly retire old item, constantly let teacher put their new item in. When teacher put their new item in, you need to help teacher how to calibrate item, how to evaluate if item is a bias against certain ethnic group, if item has high discrimination. All these technology, actually, that means, it's like a one stone kill many birds. Or not only will help students, but also help the teacher. Teacher can do much better job. And at that time, students can log on the university website. They can do practice, and eventually they find that their final scores have been improved dramatically for the people. And now our study, has a new module, and we try to use some new technology like item bias detection. And we're talking about diversity, we're talking equity. However, these are not slogan. You need to invent methods to help teacher, to equip teacher with this tool, right? And if two groups, we found that in physics exam, some teachers write items with some military equipment, like what kind of cannon, what kind of hallways are, all these questions. But statistics indicates these questions actually bias against female students in STEM learning. And these can be revised in public tests. The United States has already, established some kind of mandatory rules, and all the public test items should be screened for bias detection for 3 combinations. One is male versus female, one is African American versus white, the other is Hispanic versus white. But in class assessment, we still haven't done that yet, and we need to do this statistically. Also, the last thing I want to say, currently the system is defined as a 2-step, pre-test, pre-learning, and after-learning. But eventually present this very fancy statistical module. This is called continuous learning. So you always just, students always generate their pattern, and then we can always analyze them. And we'll also give the news called learning policy. So that's the reason, though we don't have big money, I'm very happy. We have 2 students who are supported for the programming. And in the future, I think we can write a big proposal. Thank you very much.
So we have time for questions for Huang, and then while Huang's talking and answering questions, Adrie can come on up. So questions for Dr. Chen? So I had one question for the CD cat. What does the CD stand for?
Cognitive diagnosis.
Cognitive diagnose. And then these are formative assessments, so they're taking.
Yes or no?
How often will they take it, like in a one semester physics class? How often will they do these CD cat?
And they will periodically, like every month, just like moving, when teacher teach the class, then they will constantly assess the students, then they move the next chapter, they will assess the students. So we can always get feedback to teachers about this.
Thank you. Question from Shamila. She said, thank you very much, Dr. Chang. I'd like to know if these systems are for multiple choice only, or if they can work for paragraph answers too.
They can work, first of all, multiple choice is the easiest.
Yeah,
Also be paragraph, there will be some further work. And also, we need to establish some learning, like for rubric, like natural language processing. Yeah, and even for the essay, the technology is ready. Essay reading, your GRE paper is actually rated by computer.
really?
Yeah.
Wow. And I guess maybe a related question of, have people learned to hack those algorithms to produce an essay that the grading algorithm will love?
Then, that part computer is so smart, they can immediately find that you just, you copy the some paragraph from somewhere, they will just give you very low score.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, next we have Dr. Adrie Koehler, co-PI on a grant called Expanding Accessibility of Learning Through Blended Synchronous Instruction of Face-to-Face and Remote Students.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm a co-PI. Nathan Minzer is the PI on this project, and we have a couple other co-PIs as well, Lakshmi Mohandas and Sean Carrington. So this project really stems out of Nathan's course. So, and it really was spurred by COVID-19, right? So many instructors had to shift what they were doing to blended and online options. And so some unique things about his course is that over 1,500 students go through it each year. So it's a very large course, which presented a really good case where we could have data and see how we could make an experience like this scalable, especially considering this course is a very hands-on, student-centered. They do a lot of teamwork. So how can you, and when we're talking about this blended, we're talking about high flex specifically. So that means that we're all meeting at the same time in this case, but some of the students may be face-to-face and some may be remote at the same time. So how can we do that on this large scale? So they have typically, 40 students per section, and we're talking like, 17 plus sections every semester. So it's a lot to kind of keep consistent and to make sure that everybody's having a good experience. So we're really interested in thinking about how can we promote active learning in an environment like this, and also, what's going on the student side. What are they learning the same across these environments? On the instructor side, what technologies are being used? What are the instructional practices, that sort of thing. And so what's something to consider is, even before COVID, we had students that would get sick sometimes and wouldn't be able to come to class or have other extenuating circumstances. So, as we move beyond quarantine and things like that, how can this still be something that is really useful? And you've probably heard a lot of people talk about like the new normal, that sort of thing. And so a lot has shifted in what we think about participation and attendance and that sort of thing. So that's kind of what this contributes. So we have a lot of data, as you can imagine. So how this setup is, we use Microsoft Teams, just like what we're using to host this meeting today. So students have to log in, to that system at the beginning of the class. The instructor is sharing their screen every time. So we just presented, some of this at ARA last week. And so some of the questions we got were like, how did you do this? Did you have to have a lot of technology? And that was something that, we want to emphasize, is that we did this with no budget, basically, like what tools were already available to us at Purdue, so that we could really share a model that other people could work with, as depending on what kind of technologies they had access to. So based on that, we have like Teams recordings from the sessions, and these are both like the large class group meetings, and then when students are working in their teams individually, it's also recorded. So, on a given day, some of the students may be face to face, but they may have a remote member in the classroom at the same time, so we can kind of record or see that through observation. So that's a data source. We also have asked the students to complete surveys related to the community of inquiry, self-regulation. We have attendance data, like how are they participating? And it's interesting because across sections, although they have the same assignments, some instructors are very strict about like, hey, you should only be remote if you have something come up, you need to tell me about it. While other ones were like, oh, use it to however it works best for you. So we see a lot of variation. So that's going to be kind of interesting to compare across sections as well. We also have observations, focus groups are from student and instructor perspectives. We've done some instructor interviews, and we're looking at assignments. So this allows us to kind of make comparisons across how students are, if they're participating remotely a lot versus face-to-face, we can see, well, how is that impacting their performance in the course? How is that impacting their perception of community in the course, their self-regulation? And we also are looking at, so we're working on a case study right now where we've interviewed instructors and doing course observations to make comparisons across the way that they are facilitating this type of learning in those sections. So some initial findings, and of course, this is very high level, and this is representative of like multiple studies, but one thing that we found is that when we look at the ratio of like days of remote to face-to-face, if we kind of do a correlation between that and their community of inquiry scores, that there's not a significant difference. In this case, that's good, right? We don't want there to be a significant difference in how they are experiencing that community. So regardless if they are face-to-face all the time, or they've been remote several times throughout the semester, everybody has basically shared that it's been a positive experience. So that's really some good feedback for us that, hey, we're still able to create this environment for students that they want to be a part of. They feel like there's good social presence among their peers. There's a strong teaching presence among how learning is being facilitated, and the cognitive presence is also strong. So across those three areas. So when we start to look at the difference between instructors, we are seeing that, of course, with some of the novice, most of these students are, most of the instructors are graduate students, that TAs for the sections. And so ones that are first starting, of course, we see some differences between how comfortable they are with like, okay, hey, I got to get my headset on, I got to do all these things to get ready for class, versus ones that have done it a few more times. But we see a lot of different facilitation styles, which I kind of alluded to on the last slide. And there's a lot of effective ways that we can do it, and we hope to share some best practices from that research, and then also kind of look at, how we can better support instructors that are implementing this across these different. And then also, Nathan and Lakshmi, and then a grad student, just had a paper published in the Journal of Computing and Higher Ed. It's just available online like 3 days ago or something. But what's interesting in that study is they compared, again, attendance, how students were joining class versus how their performance were on some different assignments in the course. And so what they basically found was, overall there was successful learning across the two groups, like the number of times that they were remote. But in the high flex section, because I think they compared it to pre-COVID data where everybody was just face to face at that time, that there was maybe a wider range in the high flex. There were more A's, but there were also more F's. So it averaged out the same as the other course, but there was a little bit more variation. So that's some of our initial findings in a very quick overview. So.
Thank you. All right, Marisa, if you want to get set up, and questions for Dr. Koehler.
A question about, you, right, on the slide. I was wondering, because based on what you presented, the initial finding and then those, presentations. I was wondering if you would look at cognitive presence a little bit more closer, like as you continue to work on these and then. Anyways, just your plan.
Yeah.
Like cognitive presence.
So there is more work again going into like comparing performance basically on their team projects and some of those things that go along with cognitive presence, like how are they being challenged and that sort of thing. So I think that's some upcoming work where they look at, they have like CAPME, like the group score too. That's something that they're looking at right now to see how their group dynamics are and that interaction of when they're dealing with a problem, like how they go about that process to make meaning.
Can you tell us what it looks like physically during high flex, like from the instructor's view of the classroom? How do they see the online students? How do people physically see them?
Yeah, so they have webcam, so which kind of forces the instructor to have to stay close to where that station is. And so then individually, I don't know now whether they still have, since I don't actually teach one of these courses, but like whenever COVID was going, full force and everything, in their groups, they set with their group members, but then if they had to be on teams too. So they had their webcams going in class and then webcams in wherever the remote student was. So then when they broke into teams though, sometimes then they would take their computer and their whiteboards and they would maybe be working like this and they would turn their laptop to like capture some of that.
Oh, very cool. Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of how, there wasn't any additional technology that was besides like what a typical classroom, so.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for? Yeah. All right, next we have Dr. Marisa Exter. She's PI on a project called Collaborative Research, a data-driven employer academia partnership for continual computing curricular change.
Thanks, Wayne, for reading that off, so I don't have to. Let's see, this is actually a multi-institutional grant, which to be honest, I don't really totally understand the difference between that and other types of grants that are multiple institutions. But one of the differences is that each of the institutions has its own PI. So I'm the Purdue PI on the team. Within our big team, we've got a number of smaller teams that are doing different components of this process. So my team is the competency/research team. We also have, where it says local team, those are pilot institutions, 3 pilot institutions in Alabama. We have a national team that's distributing what we're doing nationally through workshops and presentations and other means. And we'll have a website with all of our materials. We have one, it's not great, so we're developing a new one right now that'll have a lot more materials on it. So here are the names of the Purdue team members to the, is that the right? And then we have a couple of other people that are working with us. Dr. Mihaela Sabine is in University of New Hampshire. Dr. Sujan Dwan is actually a graduate from Purdue and she continues to work with us. Although she's not officially, on the NSF funded part of the project, she was a volunteer and then continued to work with us. So I'm not going to go over this in depth, but just if you haven't heard the word computing before, in the computing world in the United States right now, they're using this as an umbrella term for those academic disciplines. In the workforce, people from various disciplines can do the same job, or people from one of those disciplines can end up doing multiple jobs. So I'm not gonna show it now, but that's part of the struggle for our project, is identifying who are the people that we actually count as in computing. So our challenge, for the project overall is to engage academia and moving towards a competency-based approach. Another part of it is to make some sort of partnerships between employers and academia, which is more common in engineering than it is in computing right now. So we're trying to build that up. For our team, we want to create definitions and materials that are accessible as well as informative, because right now, although there's been a push for about 10 years in computing towards competency-based models, a lot of them are complex, or people have difficulty implementing them in their institutions. So we came up with this model, which is not entirely novel, but we've adjusted for this project. So competencies are expertise individuals can demonstrate in a professional, but also in educational, social, or other life contexts. Although our focus is on learning from the professionals to try to focus on competencies for within computing education. So in our model, we have computing content knowledge, computing skills, cross-cutting skills, which are similar to what other people might call soft skills, professional skills, 21st century skills, and then dispositions. And this is one often in competence models, they call it KSA, where A is attitudes, abilities, there's a lot of words, but in computing, they use the term dispositions. So what we intend to produce is a list of these. Research-based, we're going to focus on the skills and dispositions because the knowledge is very well known. And create materials that are, again, easy for people to use and understand, both new competency-based pedagogical and assessment approaches, as well as the list itself. Here are the research questions. You can see them later. Here's our complicated research design, but more simply stated, we've got a systematic lit review. We interviewed 32 professionals and managers, and then we're pulling some additional competencies from Sophia, which is kind of a database of competencies, making the model. And then right now, we're working on preparing the survey of professionals and academics, so we can compare what they have to say about the importance of competencies and how much they're covered currently in programs. And we'll be actually implementing that in the fall, because this is the third year of our 3-year. If you want to know about SLR, you can ask Shamila later. I said we interviewed 32 people, and these are the lists that we've come up with. And if you look, we've actually got more dispositions than anything else. Where typically lists of dispositions are somewhere between 10 and 12 items. A lot of times they've come up, they're in a model, but they've been sort of derived by committee, and these are all derived through our research. Any questions?
Yeah. Good time. Go back to the more complicated research design slide. He's went through that so fast. There we go. Excellent. And so this is just for your portion of the grant, right?
Right.
Okay.
Now, the surveys, several teams are gonna sort of work together to distribute the surveys, and we're splitting some things apart, but our team is doing the rest of it.
One question I had, maybe it's on the other slide, but I never heard of a competency database. You said it's called Sophia.
Yeah,
Can you tell us more about that and how you're using it?
so it's a website, but I think you can actually get their raw data. And I think it's mostly used in Europe. It's not used so much in the United States. But they have a list of, I can't remember if I think they do call them competencies, and they have it broken down, not exactly by job. It's kind of hard to describe, I guess. But they have a set of competencies, sort of similar to us. They have skills, cross-cutting, and computing and some other industries, but a lot of it is fairly focused on computing. And then they have this other set of behavioral attributes, I think they call it, which are not exactly like our dispositions. They're sort of somewhere between cross-cutting skills and dispositions, which actually is one of the big challenges for our grant overall, because a lot of times people conflate what they call soft skills, are sort of the professional skills and the dispositions put together, and we're separating them. because there are different pedagogical and assessment approaches for those two. Sorry, that didn't exactly answer your question.
But that's good. That's helpful. Great.
How did you choose your partners, the other institution?
It was kind of organic. I think that, you know, we had a few people. It was actually, there was a discussion about another study I did, and then some people became interested, and then people brought in other people. And then those people that were really interested, all, you know, their institutions became partners. So a lot of these are just one person from the institution. From, you know, obviously we have some more people, and then Alabama, University of Alabama has several people, and Tuskegee has several people because those are the pilot institutions.
Questions? Thank you. All right, before we move on, so Jill's gonna be next, Mike, so we'll get Jill set up. I just want to acknowledge, Paul Asunda was, hoping to present this morning. He had a family emergency that came up. I just want to make you aware of this project. He's the PI on a project called Characterizing How Teachers Design Engaging Learning Environments in STEM Education, examining teachers and students' conceptualizations of integrated STEM. So one thing that I hope you've noticed, come on, it's up. One thing I hope you've noticed as far as the diverse range of populations that are being served by this grant, from formal university settings to industry partners outside of the school to in school. We're going to hear a couple more examples as we move forward. So with that, Jill Newton, Dr. Newton, is the PI in a NSF grant called Developing a Curriculum Coherence Toolkit with Teachers. So with that, Dr. Newton, you're on.
Thanks so much, Wayne. Nice to see everybody virtually, and those of you in the room. I guess I'm seeing all of you virtually. But we're lucky today because one of our, I want to say graduate students, she's not actually officially a graduate student yet, but she'll start as an official graduate student in the fall. And she's been working on this project for about a year. Like several of you, our grant was also caught up in COVID. So it of course evolved over time. So anyway, I will turn it over to Doris to tell you a little bit about it.
Doris, you can mic up.
Okay, yeah, my mic is on. So will you control my slides, Mike?
I need to know the name of the presentation that you have.
Sure, it's NSF C3T2, presentation
Okay.
1. Yep.
One
Thank
second.
you.
Let me fire that up.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Absolutely. All right.
Perfect.
Good to
Awesome.
go.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Jill. Hi, everybody. My name is Doris Fullwider. And like Jill said, I'm a graduate student, well, almost officially. And I'm so excited to share with you the work that we are doing. So our project is called Co-Developing a Curriculum Coherence Toolkit with Teachers. And we refer to it as C3T2. And our project is a National Science Foundation DRK-12 Exploratory Collaborative Grant.
Ready to go?
Okay, yep, next slide, thank you. So this project began several years ago, and initially it was a collaborative, work across 4 universities. But over time, some of the students working on the project graduated and moved on to different universities. And so now we are collaborating across 6 universities, and you can see them all here. So the project is currently led by Dr. Jill Newton from Purdue, Dr. Marcy Wood from University of Arizona, and Dr. Amy Olson from Duquesne University. But we also have these other universities represented. And what's really great about this project is that we have not only all of these leaders, but we have several graduate students from across these universities and even undergraduate students working. So it's just a really diverse team and a lot of people, which I think is really great. Okay, next. So a little bit of background and timeline of our project. The project really explores teachers' use of mathematics curricular materials in the context of the proliferation of online resources, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic, which Dr. Newton just mentioned. So we have a focus on curricular coherence, teacher autonomy, and the use of teacher-developed curriculum from sites such as Teachers Pay Teachers and Pinterest. So we're really looking at teachers' use of curricular materials in their decision-making. So I'll give you a brief timeline of the past couple of years and kind of where we're going this year. So in 2020, we conducted a nationwide survey about elementary teachers' math curricular use. And then from that data, we followed up by conducting some interviews with elementary teachers in Indiana. So I'll talk a little bit about those participants and the interviews, but we did that in 2022, and then we're going to move forward this year and continue that process with elementary teachers in Arizona and Pennsylvania. Okay, thank you. So the participants in the interviews I mentioned from 2022 were 5 teachers. They're all from the same school in the Midwest. They're all female, they're all white, and they range in age from 28 to 36 years. The 5 teachers range in teaching experience from 6 to 13 years. We thought this was interesting, but all of the teachers enjoy and feel confident in teaching mathematics. And finally, the teachers use as many as 14 different curricular resources to teach mathematics, which is a lot. Okay, next. Thank you. So the student population at the school from where these teachers work is very diverse. You can see here, we have 37% of white students, 29% of Black African-American students, 22% Hispanic, 11% multiracial, and then 1% Native American. So it's a very diverse student population. Next. Thank you. 78% of the students at this school are economically disadvantaged. We have 11% of the students who are English language learners, and 16% of the students are students with disabilities. Great. So looking at the interviews that I was talking about earlier in 2022, it was a 3-phase interview process. And so there were 2 individual interviews done with each teacher. And then the 3rd interview was a focus group interview where all of the teachers were present talking with one another and the facilitator. So the first interview that we did with each teacher focused on identifying the mathematics curricular resources they used and also the degree of autonomy they had in selecting and adapting their resources. The second interview focused on the lesson planning process and how teachers created cohesive learning from the resources they used. And then in the focus group interview, the discussion was revolved around coherence, adaptations, and collaborations. Then when I joined the group, we decided to take all of this data and look at it through multiple lenses. So we broke into small teams. One team looked at coherence, curricular coherence. One team looked at thematic analysis. Another team looked at Teachers Pay Teachers and Pinterest. And finally, the last small group looked at teacher stories. And so just a taste of some of the findings from each of those groups. The curricular coherence group found that the teachers in the study made decisions that varied according to their worldviews and their professional obligations. And in the thematic analysis group, the data analysis revealed that there were 5 factors that influenced teachers' selection of curricular materials. So they looked for materials that were engaging to students, based on their current level of mathematical understanding, accessible to teachers and students, that connected with mandated curriculum and policy, and finally, materials that aligned with state standards and standardized tests. Teachers pay teachers in Pinterest, found a lot of interesting things. Some teachers used those sites rarely, some used them daily. They had control, they were expected to pay for materials themselves. They were really looking for multidisciplinary project and theme-based lessons. And interestingly, they really expressed an appreciation for that community of teachers engaged on that site. And finally, teacher stories. So through examining the key words, lines of reasoning, and metaphors teachers in our study used when explaining their curricular decision-making, we found that they are experiencing an unprecedentedly wide range of achievement levels in their classrooms and are especially interested in engaging their struggling students. And that's it.
Right. All right.
Thank you.
Questions for Doris and Dr. Newton? You're online or face-to-face? I'll start off with one question. I understand a lot of professors and people that care about curriculum coherence really worry about teacher pay teachers and Pinterest. And what came up in your study? Are you concerned about, pulling random things off of there, or do you think it's actually a good site for teachers to use? What are your opinions on that, or your findings so far?
Maybe I'll take this one just because this was part of the study that I was working on recently. Well, I think that you're right. Anecdotally, we hear lots of this, people going on and willy-nilly picking things, but we didn't find this in our interviews with teachers. The teachers themselves even expressed concern about the quality of some of the materials. But the teachers that we interviewed were really purposeful. They looked for teachers that they had used their materials before that they found really productive. They asked other teachers. There are chat rooms on there, so you can ask, you can preview materials. And they talked a lot about rigorous mathematics, looking for rigorous mathematics when they were looking at those sites. So I feel like the teachers that we interviewed in some sense were contrary to those anecdotes. And it's not surprising those anecdotes are out there, right? Because this is kind of how teachers are often portrayed in a lot of spaces, is that they just, I don't know, lazy, or they just are looking for the easy way out or whatever. Everybody in this room knows that is certainly not true. But we really found that teachers were very careful and purposeful in their selections, and they have to pay for these materials themselves. So they're not on there just downloading anything they see. They really are being really intentional. And it seemed like over time, they had really developed a lot of skills, particularly during COVID, because so many people were looking for online resources at that time.
Thank you. Other questions?
I think sometimes it's a matter of like media literacy that we teach students, but because there are some good resources out there. So did you all have any instances where it seems like you said everyone knew where you felt like it could present an opportunity to help teachers discern, because there are, I know like they have some TikTok channels now and that are pretty good with teaching like phonics and phonemic awareness and things like that. But did it like bring up some more ideas about some future research y'all could do?
Well, I
and
think, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No,
I
Doris,
was
you go.
just going to say, yeah, there has been a lot of discussion about future research ideas stemming from this project for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting, that thing that what Doris said, the very last finding there about teachers pay teachers, was really beyond teachers pay teachers during COVID. What the benefit for these teachers that they said over and over again was they were connected with teachers all over the country in Facebook groups and all kinds of things that really didn't exist. They existed pre-COVID, but they weren't so essential, right? So teachers really having opportunities to learn from one another and connect with teachers all over the world, all over the country, all over the world, to get ideas, to get materials, to get resources and things like that. So I think that teacher community beyond your own school is really an interesting, and I think ripe for more investigation.
Love that community of practice.
Yep.
Fantastic. All right, thank you. again.
Thank you.
All right, our final presenter is Dr. Wonki Lee, a proud graduate from the College of Education and currently a postdoctoral researcher, also here at Purdue, but working from the West Coast. So thank you for getting up early, Dr. Lee, to join us here. She'll be talking about the project that she's working on, NSF funded, called Learning by Evaluating, Engaging Students in Evaluation as a Pedagogical Strategy to Improve Design Thinking. So that, Dr. Lee, you're on.
Hi, everybody. Good morning and good afternoon. So it is 9 a.m. here and nice meeting you all virtually. Does anybody mind pulling out my presentation? It is called Power Friday _ Learning by Evaluating.
I'm working on it.
Thank you.
It's the PDF.
Yep.
Hang on 1 second here. We'll get it up.
Yeah, we can see it here in the room. One
Yep.
second, we'll get it online.
I'll share it and we're just.
Gotcha. Yeah. So let me start with briefly the Purdue portion of this project. So it is called Learning by Evaluating, and we call it as acronym-wise LBE. And I'm a postdoc researcher in this team, and our PI is Dr. Menster. And we are collaborating with 4 different organizations. Let me start. So, yep, we can move on to the next page, I think. Yep, here are brief information about our NSF project. We are currently a group of researchers, and 3 universities is collaborating. Purdue and Brigham Young University and University of Georgia is collaborating. And we try to improve student experiences by incorporating an assessment system called ACJ. It is called Adaptive Comparative Judgment. So it is like different type of adaptive judgment. So it is like called Learning by Evaluating in this project, but it is originally coming from ACJ, Adaptive Comparative Judgment. Comparative judgment is like simply ask each marker or grader to make a series of judgment about a pairs of tasks, and the grader looks at both stories or artifacts side by side, like A/B testing in technology term, and decide which one is better. It is quite a process that the assessor make a relative judgment, not absolute one. So instead of using rubric, it like allows any marker, grader, or TA make a series of consecutive judgment between 2 pairs of artifacts. Instead of using it as an assessment, we'd like to utilize this process to as a primer for student project. And we collaborated with ITEEA and Engineering by Design, and they are offering curriculum to the students we are collaborating. And we currently are collaborating with a school district in Georgia. Definitely, we are not collaborating with Georgia because of this peachy state or like somewhere outside Indiana. We are collaborating this state, school district because like it is using the engineering curriculum offered by ITEEA, and like they are sharing the common curriculum offered by ITEEA, and at the same time, the population or diversity also affects our decisions. So these are like brief information about our NSF project. And still it is, I totally understand that like it is hard to get what that LBE actually looks like. So let's move on to the next page to dig deeper. The learning by evaluating is like basic overview is look like this. Students, before their engineering design projects, such as like let's make dragster cars or strong bridge or like pizza boxes. So their engineering design courses require students to develop the project like 3 to 5 projects. And before each project, students are required to participate in this LBE. So students make 5 to 10 decisions. They are kind of make a series of decisions between A and B and ask them like which is better and why. And after each decision, they need to write down like why you choose B over A or A over B. And by doing this, we are expecting learning benefits because like the kind of artifacts given in A and B, they are coming from previous student artifact, which was like good or bad. We think student can learn from good artifact, so-called good artifact effect, as well as like less better artifacts. So by exposing them to the previous artifacts, we are expecting implicit learning. And from the perspective of students, if it is not that good, they need to provide a reason on their comment. And we expect it promotes or facilitates student critical thinking. Finally, in order to write something logically, students need to use their scientific reasoning skill. And using this LBE won't maximize student potential. So like we are thinking about, like we are expecting how we can actually maximize the educational benefits of LBE. So in the next page, you can see that like this is like how it actually looks like. So we've been thinking about like statement, artifact, and teacher-led discussions. Those three are our tentative current preliminary findings about from the maximizing the impact of LBE. By providing previous student example, these are pizza box redesign project and student like you can see from the artifacts A, those three examples student designed and they have actual calculation and like diagrams and like everything. And in like B, you can see only one example of pizza boxes. So we the first thing we noted that like teacher's holistic statement is really important when providing these examples. So just like compare these two, which one is better? Is not enough. So if you are giving a very specific, very well-organized holistic statement, it will maximize student learning. So here is the holistic statement requiring student to make a decision and write your own scientific reasoning. And as I mentioned earlier, in option A and B, when students actually take a look at previous student artifacts, students have a very clear kind of thinking about what they should do in this project. On the next page. Just making a decision won't facilitate learning that kind of dramatically if it is just kind of, let's do this and okay, we're good to go. But if instructor actually promote or like organize this LBE session really effectively, we've been observing this project for 2 years and like we found that like the project student really engaged and really enjoyed was like teacher-led discussions before and after the session. So if the like instructor or teachers explain the purpose of this LBE session and if he or she or they can embed it to their current curriculum, it also maximizes decision. And after the session, these are this kind of image is the graph that students and teachers actually can see. So it shows the rank order of a collaborative decision made by entire classroom student. So like the program we are using automatically calculates the rank order of each artifact. So teachers and students can freely navigate into this program and take a look at which one ranked the best and why. And at the same time, on the right side, there is a kind of artifact that linked that got the least score or least preferred by students, and the teacher can lead the discussion why it was like less better. So by providing meaningful artifacts, holistic statement, and session organization, we found that these three kind of components maximize the incorporation of adaptive comparative judgment within the settings. So that's our current findings. And next page. That's pretty much it. I heard that like it is just a 5-minute presentation. And if you have any questions or interested in our project, just like let me know. Thank you.
Perfect timing. All right, any questions for Dr. Lee? So one quick question I have, what were the grade levels that were being targeted with this learning by evaluation curriculum?
We are currently targeting 9th grade to 11th grade students.
And is this being incorporated into certain courses or, and then like how much does a teacher need to spend on this, like in a given semester?
Oh, yeah, it is like there is an introductory engineering course mostly offered to the freshman or sophomore student. And usually I think like it depends on the teachers. It is for like mostly up to them, but like we recommend teachers to incorporate this decision making at least like twice a month before they are starting of the project.
Other questions? No? All right. Well, I want to thank
Thank
Dr. Lee again. And I want to thank all of our presenters. Again, we got a really nice feast here, I think, for the possibilities. Again, a big thank you to Dr. Steele for coming out. He'll be around if you want to chat about ideas or just general questions you have. Julie, how many lunches did we order? Okay, so there's enough here for everyone to grab a lunch. So even if you didn't RSVP, then there's plenty. So please grab a lunch. You're welcome to stay here and eat and talk, or if you need to grab it and go. But again, thank you so much for everyone for being here, and have a good rest of the semester. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Try to post
you.
online,
Thank
so
you.
We'll be thinking as we eat our sandwiches.